I never expected a dusty old letter to destroy my family, but that's exactly what happened last Tuesday. My name is Maddie, and until that morning, I was just another vocal teacher living a perfectly ordinary life in suburban Connecticut. I'd been clearing out my grandmother's house. She'd passed away 3 months ago, when I found it tucked inside an old photo album. The envelope was yellowed, the edges worn soft from age. It was addressed to my father, dated 26 years ago, and marked urgent, personal. I probably shouldn't have opened it, but Grandma had always been closer to me than anyone else in the family, and something about finding this letter among her private things made me pause. "Hey, Dad," I said into my phone, standing in Grandma's musty living room. "I'm at the house. Found some interesting old photos you might want to see." "Can't today, sweetie. Big meeting downtown." His voice had that distracted tone I'd grown used to. "Maybe this weekend?" I fingered the edge of the envelope. "Sure. No rush." I hung up and stared at the letter for a long moment before carefully breaking the seal. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant cursive that flowed across the page. As I read, my hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down on Grandma's plastic-covered couch. "Dear Robert," it began. "I know you've made your choice to stay with your family, and I respect that. But there's something you need to know. I'm pregnant." The room seemed to tilt sideways. I read the letter 3 times, each word burning itself into my brain. The writer, Sarah Anderson, explained she wasn't asking for money or marriage. She just wanted my father to know he had 2 more children out there. Lily and Ethan. My half-siblings. I must have sat there for hours, because when my phone buzzed, the sun was setting. It was my brother Jack. "Where are you?" he demanded. "Mom's been trying to reach you all afternoon. We're supposed to have dinner tonight, remember?" "Sorry, imumret." Lost track of time. "Classic Maddie," he scoffed. "Always in your own little world. Some of us have real responsibilities, you know." I barely heard his complaints. My mind was racing through every family gathering, every holiday, every time Dad had been working late or away on business. How many lies had he told? How many secrets was he still keeping? "Jack," I interrupted. "Do you ever think about, has Dad ever seemed?" "What?" "Nothing. Never mind. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my purse. At dinner, I watched my father laugh and joke, playing the perfect family man. Mom smiled adoringly at him, while Jack hung on his every word. They looked so normal, so happy. I felt like I was watching actors in a play, seeing the performance for what it really was for the first time. "Everything okay, sweetie?" Dad asked, catching me staring. "You've barely touched your food." I forced a smile. "Just tired. Long day of sorting through Grandma's things." "Find anything interesting?" Our eyes met across the table, and for a second, I thought I saw something flicker behind his confident smile, a hint of worry, maybe even fear. But then it was gone, replaced by his usual charm. "Nothing much," I lied. "Just old photos." Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It would be so easy to search for them, Lily and Ethan Anderson. To see the faces of the siblings I never knew I had. To unravel the careful fiction my father had built around our family. I closed the laptop without searching. Not yet. First, I needed a plan. Because one thing was certain, this secret wasn't staying buried any longer. The next morning, I couldn't focus during my vocal lessons. My student, a promising soprano, hit a perfect high C, but I barely noticed. The letter in my purse felt like it was burning a hole through the leather. "Miss Turner," she asked, waving her hand in front of my face. "Was that better?" "Sorry, Emily. Let's take a break." I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from Jack. Great. I'd barely set the phone down when it buzzed again. This time I answered. "What?" "Dad's worried about you," Jack said without preamble. "Says you were acting weird at dinner last night." "What's going on?" "Nothing's going on. I'm working." "Right. Because teaching teenagers to sing is such demanding work." His tone dripped with the same condescension he'd been using since I chose music over joining Dad's business. "Look, we're having lunch with Dad today." He insists. My stomach clenched. "I can't." "It's not optional, Maddie." "Well, oklaki giovannis." I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes late, hoping to avoid the pre-lunch small talk. No such luck. Dad and Jack were waiting outside, deep in conversation about some business deal. They looked so similar, both in crisp suits, both radiating that easy confidence that came from never having their worlds turned upside down. "There's my girl." Dad opened his arms for a hug. I gave him a quick, stiff embrace, noticing how he frowned at my response. Over bread and salads, they talked about Jack's latest promotion while I pushed lettuce around my plate. Dad kept glancing at me, his smile a little too bright, a little too forced. "So," he said during a lull, "how's the rest of the cleanup going at your grandmother's house?" I met his gaze. "Interesting. Found lots of old papers. Letters. That sort of thing." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Anything important? Maybe." "I'm still sorting through everything." Jack rolled his eyes. "Who cares about old papers?" "Dad, tell Maddie about that development deal you're consulting on." But Dad's attention stayed on me. "You know, sweetheart, I could help you go through those papers. Save you some time." "I bet you could," I muttered. "What was that?" "Nothing." I stood up abruptly. "I need some air." Outside, I leaned against the brick wall, taking deep breaths. A moment later, Jack followed me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded. "Dad's trying to help, and you're acting like a teenager. You don't understand." "No, you don't understand. Some of us actually appreciate what Dad's done for this family. While you've been playing music teacher, he's been making sure we're all taken care of." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. "All of us? You sure about that, Jack?" His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could answer, Dad appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay out here?" "Fine," I said quickly. "I just remembered I have a student coming in soon. I should go." "Maddie, wait." Dad caught my arm as I passed. His voice dropped low. "Whatever you think you know. Let's talk about it first. Just you and me." I pulled away. "Like you talked to Mom about Sarah Anderson?" The color drained from his face. Behind him, Jack looked confused. "Who's Sarah Anderson?" "Nobody," Dad said quickly. "An old business associate." "Right." I grabbed my purse. "Just business. That's what it's always been, hasn't it, Dad?" I walked away, my hands shaking. I'd promised myself I wouldn't confront him like this, wouldn't let emotion drive my actions. But seeing him there, so composed, so certain of his control over everything and everyone, it made something snap inside me. My phone buzzed with a text from Jack. What the hell was that about? I ignored it and opened my laptop instead. It was time to find out exactly who Lily and Ethan Anderson were. Time to see what other secrets my father had been hiding all these years. What I found made me wish I'd never looked. I needed someone to talk to before I completely lost my mind. That's how I ended up at Grace's house at 11 at night, clutching my laptop and the damning evidence I'd found. "Holy shit," Grace whispered, scrolling through the social media profiles I'd discovered. "Lily Anderson looks exactly like you." She did. Same dark hair, same smile, even the same way of tilting her head in photos. But it was the other discoveries that had sent me spiraling. "Look at this." I pointed to an old newspaper article. Dad was on the board of directors for the art gallery where Sarah Anderson worked. He didn't just have an affair, he was her boss. Grace's eyes widened. "That's complicated. It gets worse." I pulled up another page. "He's been paying for things. College tuition for both kids, starter money for Lily's art studio, the down payment on Ethan's condo. While you had to take out loans for music school," Grace finished quietly. My phone buzzed, another text from Jack. I'd been ignoring him for 3 days, but he was getting more insistent. "He keeps demanding answers. Says Dad's acting strange, missing meetings." "Good," Grace said. "Let him squirm." I ran my fingers through my hair. "I don't know what to do. If I tell Mom." "Tell me what?" We both jumped. My mother stood in Grace's doorway, still in her tennis clothes. I'd forgotten she and Grace were doubles partners. "Evelyn," Grace stammered. "We were just having a private conversation about my family." Mom's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I thought I might find you here, Maddie. Your father's worried sick." I closed the laptop, but not before Mom caught a glimpse of the screen. Her face changed, just slightly, but enough for me to realize something I should have seen before. "You know, don't you?" The silence stretched between us. Grace quietly excused herself to the kitchen. How long have you known? I asked. Mom sat down, her perfect posture never wavering. Since the beginning. Sarah called me before she sent that letter to your father. The room spun. 26 years. You've known for 26 years and never said anything. What good would it have done? She smoothed her tennis skirt. Your father made his choice. He stayed. He stayed and kept supporting them in secret, paying for their education while my voice cracked. While you what? Chose to pursue music instead of joining the family business? That was your decision, Maddie. This isn't about my career choices. It's about lies and… My phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Mom said quietly. He deserves a chance to explain. I let it go to voicemail. Like he explained to you? You don't understand. Then help me understand. Help me understand why my entire life feels like a lie. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Grace peeked in. Maddie? Your father's here. My heart stopped. You called him? I had to, Grace said. He came by my house earlier, worried sick about you. I might have let slip that you found something in your grandmother's house. I stared at her, betrayal burning in my chest. Through the window, I could see Dad standing on the porch, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Let him in, Mom said. It's time we all talked. No. I grabbed my purse. I'm not ready, Maddie. But I was already heading for the back door, ignoring their calls. In my car, I pulled up Lily Anderson's profile again. Her art gallery was having an opening this weekend. The invitation was public. Maybe it was time to meet my sister. Behind me, I could see Dad entering Grace's house, could imagine the conversation starting without me. Let them talk. Let them try to control the narrative like they always had. I had other plans now. I spent 3 days hiding out in my apartment, screening calls and canceling lessons. On the 4th morning, someone knocked on my door. I expected Dad or Grace, maybe even Jack. Instead, I found Professor Wilson standing there, looking exactly as he had when I was his student 15 years ago. Your father called me, he said, holding up a paper cup. Brought your favorite tea. I let him in, more out of muscle memory than anything else. He'd always had a way of appearing when I was about to make a terrible decision. The gallery opening is tomorrow, I said, taking the tea. He nodded, surveying the chaos of my living room. Laptop open to Lily's website, social media printouts scattered everywhere. The letter from Sarah Anderson front and center. Your father mentioned you found something disturbing. Did he tell you what it was? No. He settled into my armchair. But I remember Sarah Anderson. She was quite talented. Her daughter seems to have inherited that gift. I nearly dropped my tea. You knew. I knew Sarah. The rest. He gestured vaguely. One draws conclusions. Why didn't you ever say anything? Not my story to tell. He picked up one of Lily's gallery postcards. But I see you're planning to make it yours. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Jack, Dad's in the hospital. Stress-induced cardiac episode. Come home now. My hands started shaking. Professor Wilson gently took the phone, read the message, and handed it back. Your father's actions have consequences, he said quietly. But so do yours. Are you saying this is my fault? I'm saying revenge rarely brings the satisfaction we expect. He stood up. Before you go to that gallery opening, ask yourself what you're really hoping to achieve. I just want the truth. No, he said, heading for the door. You want justice. But justice and revenge aren't always the same thing. After he left, I sat staring at my phone. Dozens of missed calls from Mom, Jack, even Grace. Finally, I dialed the hospital. Turner, I told the receptionist. Robert Turner's room? Family only, she said. I'm his daughter. A pause. Oh yes. Miss Turner. Your brother said you'd be coming. Room 412. I found Jack pacing outside Dad's room. When he saw me, his face darkened. Nice of you to finally show up. Want to tell me what the hell is going on? Through the window, I could see Dad sleeping, monitors beeping steadily. Mom sat beside him, holding his hand, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. How bad is it? I asked. Minor episode, they say. Brought on by stress. Jack stepped closer. What did you say to him at Grace's house? He came home completely shaken. Nothing he didn't already know. Stop being cryptic. If you know something, ask him about Sarah Anderson, I said. Ask him about Lily and Ethan. Jack's face went blank, then flushed with anger. You're lying. Am I? Look at Lily's picture. I pulled up her gallery website. Look at her and tell me you don't see it. He stared at the screen, his expression shifting from denial to shock to something darker. How long have you known? Does it matter? Of course it matters. He grabbed my arm. Everything matters. The company, the inheritance, our whole family. Jack. Mom's voice came from the doorway. Your father's asking for both of you. Inside the room, Dad looked old and vulnerable in his hospital gown. The mighty Robert Turner, brought low by his own secrets. Maddie, he said weakly, I can explain everything. I thought about Professor Wilson's words about justice and revenge, about consequences and truth, about the gallery opening tomorrow where my half-sister would be celebrating her first solo show, blissfully unaware her world was about to shatter. No, I said. I don't think you can. I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls, my footsteps echoing in the sterile hallway. I had a decision to make, and for the first time, I wasn't sure revenge was the answer I'd been looking for. The gallery was smaller than I expected, tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore. Through the window, I could see Lily arranging flowers near her paintings, her movements so familiar they made my chest ache. She had Mom's grace, Dad's confident smile. I'd been sitting in my car for 20 minutes when someone tapped on my window. A young man with dark hair and Dad's jawline stood there, arms crossed. You're Maddie Turner, he said when I rolled down the window. I recognize you from your website. Voice teacher, right? My throat went dry. Ethan, want to tell me why you're stalking my sister? I got out of the car, legs shaking. How did you find out? He pulled out his phone, showing me a text from Jack. Your brother reached out. Said we should know someone might try to cause trouble at Lily's opening. Of course Jack would interfere. He'd always been Dad's protector. I'm not here to cause trouble. No. Ethan's eyes, Dad's eyes, studied me. Then why are you here? Before I could answer, Lily emerged from the gallery. Ethan? Who's this? She was even more striking in person, her presence filling the space between us with unspoken questions. I opened my mouth, but no words came. This is Maddie Turner, Ethan said carefully. Robert Turner's daughter. Lily's smile faltered. Turner? As in, the board member who's been supporting my work. Supporting more than that, I muttered. What's that supposed to mean? My phone buzzed, Mom calling again. I ignored it. Look, Ethan stepped between us. This isn't the place. When's your birthday? I blurted out to Lily. April 15th, she answered, confused. Why? 9 months after Dad's business trip to Vancouver. I pulled out Sarah's letter. Where he met your mother. The color drained from Lily's face. Ethan grabbed the letter, scanning it quickly. His hands started shaking. Where did you get this? Our grandmother kept it. All these years she knew. Everyone knew except us. Lily sank onto a nearby bench. Mom always said. She said he was just a patron who believed in her art. He believed in more than her art. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. That's enough, Ethan snapped. You don't get to show up here and destroy our lives because you're angry at your father. Our father, I corrected. The gallery door chimed. An elegant woman in her 60s emerged, Sarah Anderson, looking exactly like her social media photos. She stopped short when she saw us. Maddie, she said softly, you look just like your grandmother. The world tilted sideways. You knew her. She reached out after finding my letter. We met for coffee once. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to make sure her other grandchildren were being taken care of. Other grandchildren. The words hit like a physical blow. My phone buzzed again, a text from Jack. Dad's being released. Don't do this. But looking at Lily's shattered expression, Ethan's protective stance, Sarah's quiet dignity, I realized I already had done it. I'd walked into their lives like a wrecking ball, thinking only of my own pain. I'm sorry, I whispered. I shouldn't have come. No, Lily said suddenly, standing up. Stay. Please. Ethan started to protest, but she cut him off. I want to know everything. About Dad, about Robert. About our grandmother. About you. Lily, Sarah warned. Your opening can wait. Lalay mit my eyes. Some things are more important than art. I looked at my phone again, at the dozens of missed calls from my family. Then at this other family, my family, standing before me with questions in their eyes that matched my own. There's a coffee shop next door, I said quietly. As we walked toward it, I realized Professor Wilson was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something much more complicated and much more important. 3 days after meeting Lily and Ethan, Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked better than he had in the hospital, but his hands trembled as he held out an envelope. What's this? I asked, not inviting him in. A trust fund. The same amount I set up for Lily and Ethan. He cleared his throat. It's what you deserve. The envelope felt like it was burning my fingers. You're trying to buy my silence? I'm trying to make things right. I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the hallway. Right? You had 26 years to make things right. Maddie, please. He stepped forward. I know you met them. Jack told me. Of course he did. I ripped open the envelope. The number of zeros on the check made me dizzy. This is what family means to you, isn't it? Just numbers on paper. That's not fair. Fair. I threw the check at him. Was it fair when I had to take out loans for music school while you were paying Lily's tuition? Was it fair when you missed my graduate recital because you were at Ethan's high school graduation? His face went pale. How did you? Sarah kept a diary. Documented everything. I hadn't meant to reveal that, but watching him flinch made it worth it. Every visit, every payment, every lie. I did what I thought was best. For who? My voice cracked. Because it wasn't for Mom, or me, or even them. It was all about protecting yourself. My phone buzzed, a text from Lily. Dad's lawyer called. Wants to meet tomorrow. Dad saw the message. They're still my children, Maddie. No, I said quietly. We're your secret. They're your legacy. The elevator dinged, and Jack stepped out. Of course, Dad hadn't come alone. This has gone far enough, Jack said. You're destroying everything Dad built. He destroyed it himself. I'm just exposing the truth. The truth. Jack grabbed my arm. The truth is you're jealous. Always have been. Dad didn't support your music career, so you're punishing him. I inked away. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about money or careers. It's about lies. All of it, every family dinner, every holiday, every moment was built on lies. And what about Mom? Jack demanded. Have you thought about what this will do to her? The words hit like a slap. I hadn't told Mom yet. Hadn't been able to face her. Your brother's right, Dad said softly. Think about your mother. My phone buzzed again, this time from Ethan. Mom's a mess. Thanks for ruining everything. The walls seemed to close in. Everyone I wanted to protect or avenge was getting hurt instead. Maybe Jack was right. Maybe this was all just selfish revenge. Take the money, Dad pleaded. Let me try to fix this. For a moment, I wavered. It would be so easy to take the check, to let everything go back to normal. To protect Mom from the pain, to stop hurting Lily and Ethan. Then I remembered Grandma's face when she showed me Sarah's diary, just days before she died. The truth matters, Madison, she'd said, even when it hurts. No, I said, stepping back into my apartment. I won't help you hide anymore. Maddie. I closed the door on their protests, sliding down against it until I hit the floor. My phone kept buzzing, messages from both families, all demanding answers or assigning blame. Through my window, I could see Dad and Jack getting into their car. Dad looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a moment. In that look, I saw something I'd never seen before, fear. He wasn't afraid of losing money or reputation. He was afraid of losing control of his carefully constructed world. And for the first time, I realized that exposing the truth might cost me everything, both the family I'd grown up with and the one I'd just found. But I couldn't stop now. The truth was already in motion, and tomorrow's meeting with the lawyer would set it in stone. I just hoped someone would still be speaking to me when it was all over. The lawyer's office felt too small for all of us. Dad sat at one end of the conference table, Jack beside him. Lily and Ethan sat opposite them, Sarah behind her children. I chose the middle, belonging nowhere and everywhere. Mom was the last to arrive. She walked in quietly, her face unreadable. Now that everyone's here, the lawyer began, but Mom raised her hand. Before we start, I have something to say. She pulled out a familiar-looking diary. Madison isn't the only one Grandma Turner confided in. The room went still. Dad's face drained of color. Evelyn, he started, but she cut him off. 26 years, Robert. I've kept your secret for 26 years. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Not for you. For them. She gestured to all of us. Me, Jack, Lily, and Ethan. Sarah stood up. Evelyn, I never meant. I know. Mom's smile was sad. Neither did I. But here we are. Jack slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. Mom, you can't possibly. I knew before your father did. Mom opened the diary. Sarah called me first. Woman to woman. She was kind enough to give me a choice. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. I stared at Mom, seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. You knew. Dad's voice cracked. All this time. Of course I knew. I chose to stay, to keep our family together. But I also chose to make sure those children were taken care of. She looked at Lily and Ethan. Your grandmother helped me set up the original trust funds. Your father just maintained them. Dad collapsed back in his chair. The money. That was you. Not all of it. But enough. Mom turned to me. I'm sorry, Madison. I should have told you when you found the letter. But I wanted to see what you'd do. Test passed. I asked, my throat tight. With flying colors. She smiled. You did what I never could. Brought the truth into the light. Ethan leaned forward. Why now? Why let it all explode? Because secrets don't protect anyone, Mom said. They just delay the inevitable. And what is the inevitable? Jack demanded. The destruction of our family? No, Lily spoke up for the first time. The creation of a new one. The simplicity of her words hung in the air. I looked around the table. At Jack's anger, Dad's defeat, Mom's quiet strength. At Sarah's guilt and hope. At my half-siblings, who shared my blood but not my history. The trusts will be divided equally, Mom continued. 5 ways. No more secrets. No more separate accounts. I don't want the money, I said. Neither do we, Ethan added, surprising everyone. Mom nodded. Then it goes to charity. But that's not why we're really here, is it? Dad finally found his voice. Evelyn, please. No, Robert. You don't get to plead anymore. She stood up. I kept your secret, protected your children. All of them. Now it's time for you to face what you've done. And what about what you've done? Jack shot back. Lying to us all these years? You're right, Mom said quietly. I'm not innocent in this. None of us are. The lawyer cleared his throat, but nobody paid attention. We were all watching Mom as she walked to the door. The papers are drawn up, she said. Sign them or don't. Butim donna pretending. She looked at each of us in turn. We all deserve better than a life built on lies. As she left, the weight of her words settled over us. Dad buried his face in his hands. Sarah wiped away tears. Jack stared at the table, his anger deflating. Lily reached across the table and took my hand. After a moment, Ethan added his. One by one, the walls between us crumbled, leaving only the truth, messy, painful, but finally free. The family we'd been had ended. What we'd become, that was still to be written. But at least now we'd write it together. 6 months later, I stood in Lily's gallery, watching her unveil her new collection. The centerpiece was a striking portrait, 5 figures, their features blurred but recognizable, connected by threads of gold and shadow. She'd titled it Blood and Choice. Mom stood beside me, her hand finding mine as we studied the painting. She'd moved out of the family home 3 months ago, into a small apartment overlooking the park. She looked younger, somehow lighter. Your grandmother would have loved this, she said softly. She knew what she was doing, didn't she? Keeping those letters until the right person found them. Mom squeezed my hand. She always said you were the brave one. Across the room, Ethan was deep in conversation with Jack. Their relationship had been the biggest surprise, 2 protective older brothers finding common ground in their shared stubbornness. They still disagreed about Dad, but at least they were talking. Dad hadn't come tonight. He'd sent flowers instead, with a card that read simply, "Proud of you." Lily had added them to the display without comment. Some wounds were still too fresh for forgiveness, but the anger had faded into something more complicated. Madison. Sarah approached, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. I've been meaning to give you something. She handed me a worn leather book, another diary. Your grandmother's, she explained. She gave it to me for safekeeping, said I'd know when it was time to pass it on. I traced the cover with my fingers, remembering Grandma's hands holding this same book. Why now? Read it when you're ready. Sarah glanced at her children, our siblings, with a sad smile. Some stories need time to be understood. Professor Wilson appeared at my elbow, examining Lily's portrait. Interesting technique. The connections are clear, but the boundaries remain undefined. Like family, I said. He nodded, eyes twinkling. Art imitates life. Grace arrived late, hesitating at the door until I waved her over. Our friendship had survived, though changed. Sometimes broken things heal stronger at the fracture points. Speech. Someone called out, and Lily stepped forward, radiant in her moment. This collection is about truth, she began. Not just the truth of facts, but the truth of feelings. Of connections we choose to acknowledge or deny. She met my eyes across the room. Sometimes destruction leads to creation. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Later, after the crowds had thinned, I found myself alone with the portrait. In the quiet gallery, I opened Grandma's diary to its last entry. My dearest Madison, it read. By the time you read this, you'll understand why secrets can poison even the purest love. But remember, the antidote to poison isn't always gentle. Sometimes healing hurts more than the wound. Your father chose his path, as did your mother, as did I. Now you've chosen yours. The question isn't whether you were right or wrong. The question is what you'll build from the truth you've uncovered. I closed the book as Lily and Ethan joined me. Without speaking, they each took one of my hands. We stood there, studying our blurred reflections in the portrait's glass, 3 strangers turned siblings, connected by blood and choice and the courage to face the truth. Dinner at my place Sunday? Lily asked. Mom's teaching me Grandma Turner's lasagna recipe. Jack's coming too, Ethan added. Said he'd bring that wine you like. I nodded, feeling the weight of Grandma's diary in my bag. Some stories end with neat conclusions, all questions answered, all wounds healed. But real stories, true stories, just flow into new chapters. This was ours, still being written, one Sunday dinner at a time. Behind us, the portrait's golden threads seemed to shimmer in the fading light, connecting our shadows into something new and unfinished and full of possibility. Just like family should be.